What happens when even a trained American officer dares to mock the legendary Royal Guards? At first, the crowd laughed. But when the guard finally reacted, the officer's smile vanished instantly. This moment shocked everyone at Buckingham Palace. And it's a story you won't forget. The day began like any other at Buckingham Palace. The sun gleamed off the black iron gates, where crowds of tourists gathered with cameras in hand, hoping to catch a glimpse of the world's most famous sentries, the Royal Guards. Their towering black bearskin hats and bright red tunics shone brilliantly against the pale stone of the palace walls. Among the sea of visitors, one figure stood out, a man in his 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with short cropped hair that gave away his background. He wasn't just any tourist. He was an American military officer on leave, visiting London with friends. Dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket, he carried himself with the confidence of someone used to command. His friends laughed loudly at his jokes, and soon so did the crowd. At first it seemed harmless. The officer strutted forward toward the guard on duty, mimicking his stiff posture. He locked his knees, puffed out his chest, and threw on an exaggerated stone-faced expression. He stood beside the soldier like a statue, his lips twitching as though trying not to laugh. The crowd chuckled. Phones were raised. It seemed like a lighthearted moment. But then, he pushed further. He marched back and forth in front of the guard with ridiculous over-the-top steps, swinging his arms like a cartoon soldier. "Look at me! I'm British now," he shouted jokingly, his American accent echoing across the courtyard. Some tourists laughed harder, encouraging him, but others frowned. A mother nearby pulled her child closer and whispered, "He shouldn't do that." They're not supposed to be mocked. The Royal Guard, however, didn't budge. His expression stayed locked, eyes forward, body rigid. His rifle remained at his side, gleaming in the sunlight. The guard's silence only seemed to embolden the officer, who now saluted mockingly, leaning close to the soldier's face. The tension in the air grew thicker. Some people in the crowd started murmuring nervously. A teenager recording muttered under his breath, "This is going to end badly." But the American officer wasn't finished. He leaned back dramatically, raised his hand in an exaggerated salute, and barked in a fake, cartoonish British accent, "Yes, sir!" His friends roared with laughter. The officer turned to the crowd, grinning, soaking in their attention. To him, this was just a performance, a funny story to tell later. Yet everyone knew, except him, that he was dangerously close to crossing a line. The guards weren't actors. They weren't there to entertain. And though they endured incredible provocation every day, there was always a moment when their discipline snapped into action. The officer strutted back toward the guard, this time closer than before. He stopped just a foot away, his face lit with a smug grin. Tourists held their breath. Cameras zoomed in. The palace courtyard fell almost silent, except for the sound of his boots on the pavement. And then, he made his boldest move yet. As the laughter from the officer's friends rang out, the atmosphere around Buckingham Palace began to shift. What had started as a light-hearted moment was no longer amusing to many in the crowd. The officer had taken things too far, lingering just inches from the unblinking soldier. He smirked as though he had found entertainment in testing the guard's limits. Waving his hand close to the soldier's face, tilting his head from side to side, and exaggerating his movements to mock the discipline before him. To most, it was obvious this was not comedy. It was disrespect. The Royal Guard remained frozen, his eyes forward, his weapon held with absolute precision. His uniform gleamed under the daylight, every button polished, every crease sharp, the very image of military perfection. Yet the tension was growing. The officer's mocking tone carried through the courtyard, his every exaggerated stomp echoing against the stone. The tourists who had gathered could sense the line being crossed. Some even whispered to one another, warning that the guards were not to be provoked. But warnings did little to stop the man from escalating. Emboldened by the attention of cameras and the uneasy laughter of his companions, he began parodying the guards' famous march. His steps were clumsy and exaggerated, his arms swinging wildly as he stomped across the forecourt. Some in the crowd chuckled, but most looked on with disapproval, sensing what was about to happen. The palace guards are famed for their restraint, but their authority is no act. Centuries of tradition and a strict code of conduct govern every movement, and once the boundary of respect is breached, the response is swift and decisive. It was at this moment that subtle changes became noticeable. The guard's grip on his weapon tightened, the set of his shoulders became more rigid, and though he remained silent, the warning was clear. The officer, however, misread these signals. Rather than backing down, he stood taller, squaring off as though he were challenging the soldier. He hovered dangerously close, raising his hand until it hovered just above the towering bearskin hat. He never made contact, but the intention was enough. The crowd seemed to hold its breath, the playful murmurs replaced by hushed anticipation. Phones remained raised, recording what everyone knew was about to turn. The man's grin faltered for the first time, but it was already too late. With a sudden burst of motion, the guard came to life. A single stomp thundered across the courtyard, startling even those several rows back. His voice rang out like a crack of thunder, trained and sharpened through years of military discipline, commanding authority with a force that silenced the entire space. The officer reeled back, his expression shifting from arrogance to shock in an instant. His friends fell silent, and the laughter evaporated as quickly as it had begun. The guard did not break discipline, nor did he overstep his duty. His stance was wide, firm, and unyielding, his weapon across his chest, his eyes locked forward. The message was unmistakable. This was no performer in a costume, no prop for tourist amusement. This was a soldier on duty, sworn to protect one of the most iconic sites in the world. The arrogance that had fueled the officer only moments before now looked foolish. The tension remained heavy in the air. Tourists who had once been entertained were now chastened by the demonstration of authority. The sight of the man stumbling back, embarrassed and visibly shaken, became a reminder to all present of the line that should never have been crossed. In that single moment, the guard had reclaimed the dignity of his post, and the officer had been humbled before the eyes of a global audience that would soon watch the scene unfold online. The stunned silence that followed the guard's explosive reaction lingered over the forecourt like a heavy fog. Moments earlier, the American officer had been confident, almost smug, but now his bravado melted away. He had crossed an invisible line, and the consequence had come instantly. The soldier's sudden stomp and thunderous command shattered any illusion that this was a harmless performance for tourists. The Royal Guard was not a stage actor, but a soldier of the British Army, and for the first time, everyone present understood it. The officer stumbled backward, trying to collect himself. His friends, who had been laughing just seconds earlier, lowered their phones and shifted uneasily. Their laughter no longer seemed appropriate. Some members of the crowd gasped, while others stood frozen, unsure of how the moment might escalate further. The guard had not moved to attack, nor had he abandoned his post, but the message he delivered was unmistakable. The man had come too close, and he had mocked the wrong soldier. Every tourist who has ever stood outside Buckingham Palace knows the unspoken rule. The guards may look still, expressionless, and almost statuesque, but their silence is not an invitation to provoke them. They are trained to endure, but only up to a point. The officer had treated his stoic patience like a game, daring him to move or react, and when he reached for the bearskin hat, even without touching it, the provocation became intolerable. In that instant, the guard's voice had carried more weight than any physical confrontation could. What made the moment so powerful was the contrast. The officer had been mocking, loud and theatrical, while the soldier's response was sharp, minimal, and final. He needed no display, no aggression, no elaborate gesture. A single step forward and a booming command were all it took to dismantle the officer's arrogance and silence the courtyard. It was a demonstration of authority at its purest, where discipline and training spoke louder than words ever could. The man, now visibly shaken, tried to recover some dignity. He brushed off his jacket, forcing a weak smile as though nothing had happened. But the reaction from the crowd told a different story. Phones stayed trained on him, recording every uncomfortable movement. His earlier confidence had been stripped away, replaced by the awkward realization that he had embarrassed himself on an international stage. Tourists whispered among themselves, many clearly unimpressed with his behavior. Some shook their heads in disapproval, while others muttered that he had gotten exactly what he deserved. The guard, meanwhile, had already returned to stillness, his weapon steady, his eyes fixed forward as though nothing had happened. The stomp that shook the ground, the command that silenced the courtyard, all of it seemed to vanish as quickly as it came. He had re-established control and restored order, sliding seamlessly back into his silent duty. This sudden return to composure made the moment even more dramatic. The guard had proven his authority without breaking the centuries-old tradition of stoic discipline. The officer's mockery had failed, and his attempt to humiliate the soldier had backfired spectacularly. Instead of drawing laughs, he had become the subject of hushed conversations and rolling cameras. Around him, the crowd's attention had shifted completely, no longer viewing him as a bold prankster, but as a man who had misjudged the seriousness of his actions. Every glance, every whisper added to his humiliation. For the tourists who watched, the lesson was seared into memory. These guards are not props for amusement. They are professionals carrying real weapons, charged with protecting royal grounds and symbols of British history. The officer's arrogance had pushed him into dangerous territory. And while he had been lucky to receive only a warning, others throughout history have faced more severe consequences for similar provocations. In the end, the breaking point had arrived quickly and decisively. It didn't take a shove, a strike, or even physical contact. It only took the disciplined precision of a soldier who understood the weight of his role. One stomp, one command, and the situation was over. For the officer, it was a humiliating defeat. For the guard, it was another day of duty, another demonstration of why their presence commands respect across the world. The stunned silence in the courtyard did not last long. After the guard's thunderous command, a ripple of emotion swept through the crowd. Some people gasped in shock, others broke into nervous laughter, and a few even clapped quietly as if acknowledging the soldier's authority. The American officer, who had once been the center of attention, was now shrinking back, trying to blend into the sea of tourists who were no longer cheering him on, but whispering about his foolishness. The moment had shifted entirely. Everywhere, phones were raised high, capturing the event from different angles. Dozens of tourists had recorded the incident from start to finish, and in the modern age, that meant only one thing. Within hours, the footage would begin to circulate online. What had been a small spectacle at Buckingham Palace was about to explode into an international conversation. In the immediate aftermath, the officer's friends looked uneasy, suddenly aware that they had cheered him into a situation that would follow him far beyond the palace gates. Their laughter had disappeared, replaced by worried glances at the cameras surrounding them. Strangers were already reviewing the clips, replaying the exact moment when the guard's patience ended. Some people openly muttered that the officer had deserved it, while others speculated about how strict the rules for provoking guards must be. The guard, of course, had returned to stillness, but his brief display of authority lingered in the minds of everyone who witnessed it. Tourists whispered to each other about the power of that single stomp and command, marveling at how such a small action could shift the energy of an entire crowd. For some, it was a reminder of why the royal guards are so respected. For others, it was a lesson in humility, watching a man who thought himself clever be put firmly back in his place. When the videos began appearing on social media platforms, the response was immediate. Within hours, clips with captions like "Guard finally snaps" and "American officer learns a hard lesson" spread across TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Viewers around the world debated what they had seen. Some applauded the guard, praising him for showing discipline and restraint until the very last possible moment. Others criticized the officer, pointing out that his actions reflected poorly not only on himself, but also on the respect owed to military traditions abroad. Comment sections lit up with thousands of opinions. People from Britain proudly emphasized that the guards were not actors, but highly trained soldiers who served both in ceremonial roles and in active military duties. Americans chimed in as well, with many condemning the officer's arrogance and distancing themselves from his behavior. The clash of cultures added another layer of intrigue, with viewers arguing over whether this was a simple joke gone too far or a disrespectful act against one of the most iconic symbols of the United Kingdom. News outlets quickly picked up the story, framing it as another viral clash between tourists and royal guards. Articles highlighted the centuries-old traditions that make the guards so famous and explained the strict rules surrounding their conduct. Videos comparing this incident to other viral moments, tourists being shoved aside, shouted at or escorted away, were stitched together, giving audiences a broader picture of what happens when boundaries are tested. The more the video spread, the more humiliating it became for the American officer. His face, once smug with mockery, was now immortalized in freeze frames of shock and embarrassment. Screenshots of his startled expression circulated as memes, further cementing his downfall in the court of public opinion. For someone who likely thought he was being clever for a few moments of laughter, the global reaction was merciless. For the guard, however, the attention only reinforced his role as a symbol of discipline and authority. Online, people celebrated his professionalism, pointing out that he could have escalated further, but instead chose the measured, traditional response: a stomp, a command, and a return to stillness. It was a masterclass in control, a demonstration of why the guards remain one of the most respected ceremonial units in the world. By the end of the week, the video had reached millions of views across multiple platforms, sparking conversations not only about respect for the guards, but also about the viral culture of tourists pushing boundaries for the sake of a video. While the officer had sought laughter in the moment, what he found instead was a lifelong reminder of the consequences of disrespect and the enduring power of a soldier's discipline in the face of provocation. For the guard, it was just another day of duty. He returned to silence, his eyes forward, his weapon steady, his composure unbroken. But for everyone else, both those present at Buckingham Palace and the millions who watched online, the moment was unforgettable. It was proof that tradition, discipline, and respect still command authority in a world too often eager to laugh at. Seriousness, the incident between the American officer and the Royal Guard had started as a spectacle but ended as a powerful reminder of respect, discipline, and tradition. For those who watched it unfold in person, the clash was unforgettable. For the millions who later witnessed it online, the lesson was just as clear. The Royal Guards are not entertainers or props in a tourist's joke. They are soldiers, trained, armed, and sworn to uphold a duty that stretches back centuries. The guard's reaction wasn't one of anger or personal insult. It was the precise application of authority at the right moment. His stomp, his shout, and his command weren't theatrical, but rooted in military training designed to assert boundaries. What looked like a small action to the untrained eye was actually a masterclass in restraint and discipline. He did not push, strike, or escalate unnecessarily. Instead, he delivered a controlled response that silenced a mocking officer and restored order instantly. In many ways, that was the most shocking part of the encounter. Not that the officer was put in his place, but how effortlessly it was done. One trained soldier in ceremonial attire had dismantled an arrogant provocation with nothing more than posture and command, and the ripple effect of that moment stretched far beyond the palace gates. It reinforced the truth that authority, when combined with discipline, carries a weight that no mockery can diminish. The online reaction, too, revealed something important. While many people laughed at the officer's embarrassment, the overwhelming tone of global commentary was respect for the guard. People admired his professionalism and composure. They shared stories of other moments where guards had maintained dignity under pressure, reminding viewers that behind the uniform lies a history of sacrifice and honor. The internet can often be cruel, turning mistakes into memes, but in this case, the cruelest spotlight fell squarely on the one who had chosen arrogance over respect. For viewers reflecting on this viral moment, the lesson is universal. Whether you are standing outside Buckingham Palace or walking through any cultural landmark, respect is not optional. It's expected. These guards are not street performers waiting for applause. They are representatives of a living military tradition. Every tourist who crosses the line, whether out of ignorance or arrogance, risks not only humiliation, but also an encounter with a soldier whose duty demands authority. As for the American officer, his story is a cautionary tale. In the pursuit of attention, he traded dignity for ridicule. His smirk may have disappeared in an instant, but the internet ensured it would live forever as a symbol of misplaced pride. What he likely hoped would be a funny story to tell back home became a viral lesson in humility. And yet perhaps that is where the true power of this moment lies. It wasn't just about one officer and one guard. It was about everyone watching, the crowd at the palace, the millions online, and now, you. It was a chance to reflect on how we approach places of tradition, how we behave when faced with authority, and whether we choose respect or ridicule when the spotlight shines on us. So as this story closes, take the lesson with you. Discipline commands respect. Tradition deserves honor, and arrogance rarely ends well. The royal guard stood firm, unshaken and unbroken, a symbol of authority that even mockery could not touch. And now, I want to hear from you. Which country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. It's always amazing to see this community come together from all around the world. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another incredible story of discipline, history, and human behavior in action. Until next time, remember, respect isn't just given to authority because of tradition. It's earned through the unshakable discipline that moments like this prove again and again.